Thanks for joining me today. My name is Steve, and I've been a G70 owner now for over 5 years, and this is my second G70. And so, I figured, why not create a YouTube channel where people can come to and they can find out, some really in-depth owner-related stuff about the car. Like I said, this is year number 5, and I have a 2023 G70 right now, and in the past I had a 2019 G70, and I thought I would share my experiences with the YouTube family, and hopefully you get a lot out of this, and you want to buy a G70. So I've got some notes here I'm going to refer to once in a while. This is my first time doing this, so new to it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history. I got a ton of ideas for this channel, so I'm going to make a whole bunch of videos, and they're probably going to be fairly detailed, but I'll try not to talk too much. Okay, so let's start with the actual car itself and the history of the car. So it was released in North America, at least in 2019, 2018, I guess, as a 2019 model. And I bought a 2019 Dynamic, this is in Canada. So the Dynamic is one trim lower than the top trim, which was the Sport at the time. That car was Santiago Silver, and it was all drive, and it had an open differential. It didn't have Alcantara headliner. It didn't have heads-up display. It didn't have Sport Plus mode, which is available in the 23 now. So there's a few things it didn't have, but it was a fantastic car. So now I have a 2023. I decided to go to the top trim, which is the Sport model in Canada, Sport all-wheel drive, and I'm going to talk more about my ownership experience with the 2019 and compared to the 2023, but I just want to give you a sort of a real quick overview. The history of the G70. So engineering wise, the car is Korean, obviously South Korean car, and the chief engineer for the car was a gentleman called Albert Biermann. Albert Biermann used to be the head of the M division at BMW, so he's got some pretty good credentials. And then from a design perspective, there was 4 people really heavily involved in the design of the G70. So Peter Schreier, who was the designer of the Audi TT, was instrumental in designing the first generation of the G70, so the 2019, 2020, 2021. And then Luke Dockenwald was responsible for designing the facelift. So obviously most of the car was already designed. It stayed that way, and then the facelift model was designed by Luke Dockenwald. Luke Dockenwald was formerly from Bentley, Lamborghini, and Audi as well, and he was helped by 2 fellows. So Sung Yup Lee, who designed the C6 Corvette, the Camaro, the model, I guess the 2010 Camaro of that generation. And then also more recently the Bentley Continental GT. And then Alexander Sasha Silpanov, he designed the Bugatti Chiron. So it's really interesting. You can see a lot of cues from those cars in this car, things like the oval exhaust, and the grille designs and stuff. If you have a close look, you'll see a lot of design cues. The car, when it came out in 2019, got a lot of really good reviews, obviously compared to the BMW 3 Series, and you could probably say that's the car that it's closest to in terms of design and sort of dynamics and all that kind of stuff. Won Car and Driver 10 Best, 2019 Motor Trend Car of the Year, 2019 North American Car of the Year, and a whole slew of awards, with probably the most important being the 2019 Good Housekeeping Car of the Year. Just kidding. Anyway, it did, but whatever. Layout of the car. It's a front engine, twin turbo, in my case, 3.3 V6. So 2 turbos, 1 for each bank. They're small turbos, so they spool really quick. but they don't necessarily have a lot of top end sort of throughput or power. The car makes 368 horsepower in the top trim just because the variable exhaust, and 376 pound-feet of torque. Now, those numbers really aren't totally accurate. The horsepower number I think is pretty close. The torque number, however, on dyno shows 400 foot-pounds of torque. And it's a super tunable engine. And it's in the tuning world, it's still pretty new, but there's a lot of tuners out for it now, and I'm going to have a whole video on that, comparing all the different tuners and my thoughts on them. But it's a pretty fantastic car, and the engine's proven to be super reliable. The 3.3, that is. I'm not going to talk about the 2 liter because I just really don't know much about it. I've had a couple of loaner cars that were 2 liters, and they were fine. No complaints with them, but I haven't owned one, so I don't want to talk about it too much. In terms of why the G70, well, I think it really comes down to at first it started as a value proposition, right? Genesis enters the market with a 3 Series competitor, and looks great, but no one knows Genesis. Hyundai, the parent company of Genesis, hasn't always had the best reputation. So the car was priced at a value level, I would say. I bought my 2019 for I think around 53,000 Canadian. Which is cheap for a car like that. Now, it wasn't the top spec, but still quite capable. Included in that price is concierge service. So for 5 years in Canada, I think in the States it's 3, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Genesis Canada, at least where I live here, Genesis Winnipeg, been fantastic. Whenever I have any service requirements or anything, they come pick my car up. They give me the option. They say you can drop the car off, we can take a car with you, or we'll pick the car up and we'll leave you a car. I would say 90% of the time they come and pick the car up from me and they leave me a car, which I almost never use. It's usually another G70, sometimes it's a G80. But service has been outstanding for me. Warranty, so flip-flop of the concierge service. In the States, the warranty is 10 years, 100,000 miles. In Canada, 5 years, 100,000 kilometers. So I'm not really sure why that is. Seems a little unfair. I'd love to have a 10-year warranty, but I guess it is what it is. And then, from a sort of design ethos perspective, the idea of the car is luxury first, sports second. I would say that that's kind of true in some ways, but in other ways, definitely not. So, it's a quiet car. The 23 model I have has acoustic glass, and in comfort mode, it's a pretty quiet car. Like really on the highway, talking normally is quite easy, and it is quite quiet. The idea that it's a luxury first, sporty car second, like I said, is a little suspect to me. When you put this car into sport mode or sport plus mode, it's definitely not in comfort mode. It still rides really nice. Suspension obviously gets firmed up with the electronic suspension on the sport model. But the drivetrain transfers, it sort of goes from this sort of 50-50 distribution on the all-wheel drive side, and then the lightness of the steering wheel really tightens up, and the throttle sensitivity gets quite a bit more sensitive. And so, if you come around a corner, let's say in Sport Plus mode, and you give it half throttle, you're getting the tail out pretty happy. So I love that. I love that it's quiet. When my wife and I are going on a trip or we're driving around, I'm in comfort mode, and it's great. But when I'm by myself, I'm almost always in sport mode, and then if I want to have extra fun, I'm in Sport Plus mode. So it's definitely a car that has lots of personalities, and it's fun as heck. It really is. And I'm going to compare it a little bit in a bit here to some of its rivals, but I'm going to save that for another video to get in depth. In terms of features, it seems to have everything. It's got large sunroof. It's got I mean, anything you can think of in a new car today. It's got, blind spot warning. It's got a HUD. It's got, when you put the blinkers on, you get the little camera view. I can take, on the app, I can take pictures, do surround view pictures of the car. It's got every option you can think of, heated and cooled seats. And I think you probably see this in all the other reviews. So I'm not going to go over that stuff just because it's been covered a million times. But I'll talk about stuff that, as an owner, I appreciate. And one of those is, like, I live in Canada. So, like I said, 6 months of the year, winter. And the heated steering wheel is absolutely awesome. Heated seats, of course, are great. The other thing is this V6 warms up quite fast, which is really an important thing here. Over here. Yeah, so, beyond the features, the thing that I really appreciate about this car is that it's unique. It's a very unique car. And, in its class, it really does stand out, I think. When I had the first gen, the boomerang on the first gen on the side panel, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And I still love it. I think it's great. The little side vent that's been added to the second gen, or what's called the facelift model, I've really grown to appreciate that. At first I was like, I wasn't sure that I liked it that much, but it's kind of like any vehicle that you have. When you own that generation and a new generation comes out, almost invariably everybody who owns the car goes, I don't like the new generation. And but the reality is, I think the designers, for the most part, know what they're doing, and I really have grown to like the facelift generation. And so, I think it's a fantastic car, and it definitely got a personality of its own. In terms of, the feeling of the car, like I said, it's rear-wheel drive bias car, so it really has that sort of push feel versus a pull feel. And now I owned Acuras and Hondas for 25 plus years, and I'm very used to that front-wheel drive feel, which it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But the feeling of a car pushing you with rear-wheel drive, and especially when you get a little bit out of shape and stuff, is a ton of fun, and I just love the feeling. And then Genesis in the facelift model, they added active exhaust, which it doesn't add a lot, but what it really does is when the car's at idle in Sport or Sport Plus mode, and you just blip the throttle a little bit, it's got a real throaty growl. And if you're just kind of cruising around and you give it a little bit of gas, that throaty growl is there. When you punch it, it does the little burbles on shift, which is great, and they're not overdone, which I really like. Could it sound better? Yeah, you probably could. But you know what? Turbo V6s never sound that good, so I think they've done a pretty good job. Some people like their cars a lot louder, and they're gonna put a different exhaust on, which is totally fine. I won't. I think this exhaust is great, and I'm going to talk about that from a performance perspective when I do a video on performance of the car, because interestingly enough, exhaust does very little in this car, changing it, that is. Okay, so 2023, why did I trade up? I'll try to be quick on this, but it's a little bit of a long story. The 2019, like I said, was a fantastic car, and every day I swore I would keep that car. I had leased that car. It was a 5-year lease, and I was about 4.5 years in, and I was really deciding, am I going to keep this car, or am I going to trade it in or something? And I was pretty convinced I was keeping the car because I just loved it. It had one problem, which was the front cruise radar failed. They had to replace it. They did that within the first month or two of ownership, and never had a problem since. And I'm going to talk about that too, because comparing that to the 23 model, because similar issues, but I'll save that for another video. Long and short is I decided, I don't know if I want to keep a car past warranty. It's a very complex car. It's got a lot of complex things in it, and I think they're very expensive to replace. So I went car hunting, and I went and drove the BMW M340i, of course, because that's sort of the de facto car in the class. I test drove the Audi S5, a beautiful car as well. I test drove the Lexus IS500, and I had driven previously a Mercedes C43 AMG, which also pretty awesome car. And so I was sort of like, I don't know. These cars in Canada were all, let's call it 20 to 25K more depending on the car, which is a lot of money. And after test driving all of those cars, which by the way I love them all in their own unique ways, I wasn't sure. I really love the idea of the Lexus IS500 and that V8, beautiful car. But after test driving it, I was a little disappointed just because the lack of torque in that engine, low RPM. It's not a turbo car, so that's kind of what you have to expect. Anyway, so then I asked Genesis if I could test drive a 23 model of the G70 Sport all-wheel drive, so one trim up from what I had. They had the car at my door the next day. I went for a test drive in a Seville Silver with the red interior, which is, if you have a look, that's exactly what I have now. And I absolutely love the car. It's like they took the 2019, that first gen, and they just did some really nice improvements across the board. And so I was hooked. And, interestingly enough, I had, like I said, at least the 2019, and when I went to trade it in for the 23, Genesis gave me $7,000 in equity on the lease, which is super interesting. $1,000 loyalty bonus, and so the car in Canada was 61 for the 23, 61,000 and some change, minus 8K plus taxes. So we're back at like $60,000 for a top trim G70. Top trim of any of those other cars I was talking about would have been 90 to 100,000 with taxes and maybe a bit more. So I was really happy with that. Got the car about a month and a half later. Funny story on that, I ordered a Makalu Gray G70 first because in the pictures I absolutely loved how it looked. It arrived here. I saw it on the dealer lot and it was dirty from the ride in. And at that exact moment, I decided that was not the car I wanted. Now, Makalu Gray G70 owners, don't get me wrong, awesome car when it's clean. When it's dirty, I just didn't like it. Anyway, I ended up getting a Seville Silver with the Sevilla red interior, and super happy I did that. So that's the car I'm in now. It's got about 10,000 kilometers on it. It's had a couple of problems. So my 2019 had one problem. My 23 has had two problems. Ironically, the radar problem that popped up in my 2019 also popped up in my 23. They replaced the radar, no problem since. And now I have a limited slip differential issue in the rear, which I will get into details in another video. But at a high level, I'm pretty certain, based on all the research I've done and people I've talked to and some testing, that the limited slip differentials, there's problems in them in the 23 model. And I think it's exactly the same differential from 2019 to 2023 and 2024. And we're very, very certain, like 99.5% certain, the problem has nothing to do with the diff. It's that, something's happened where Genesis oil, in gear oil in the differential, doesn't have friction modifier for the clutch plates or enough. And so we believe that's the problem. Don't think any of these diffs are bad. They just don't have the right oil. Anyway, I'll get into that and then into detail in another video. Okay, quickly, performance. The 3.3 is a very strong motor. The mid-range torque is awesome. I mean, this thing just flies. It's got a soft launch, so the 10-year warranty in the United States and the 5-year warranty in Canada, and I don't remember what it is in Australia. I seem to think it's somewhere in between there. Clearly, they're trying to protect all the components so that these warranties don't have to be fulfilled over those 10 years. There's a few ways to bypass that soft launch, and I'll get into that into some other videos. But man, this thing can be a beast. More importantly than sort of the launching of this car, is the 5 to 60. If you go to Car and Driver and you sort of look at the specs of cars, you can really be fooled by how a car launches. So what's important to look at is 5 to 60, 30 to 50 performance. That's in miles per hour, by the way, and just see what it is. And this car has really, really strong numbers that way. So like I said, it's really, really quick, and if you do some mods, some really you can do some free cheap mods free or cheap mods that really add some performance to this car. But I'm going to get into the details in that in another video because I think you're going to love it. I covered order reliability. So in the last 5 years, between the two cars, 3 problems. 2 of them were the same. Other than that, it's been fantastic. And then, drawbacks. So again, high level, because I'm going to go into these into a lot of detail, because I think you guys probably wanted to know this stuff, but easy upgrade. So first off, the pads on this car, the brake pads, they're not good. They're not linear. They tend to overheat and transfer pad material to the rotors, which causes vibration and shaking, in which the dealers would take off the rotors, machine them, put the pads back on and say you're good to go, and then however many miles later or kilometers later, you're back in the same spot. So get new pads. They're not much money. You can get front pads and rear pads from anywhere from a couple $100 and up. Remove the front snorkels from this car. So the air intake snorkels are actually hidden underneath the bumper. Massive restriction. Remove those inlets. Put on Velocitech snorkels. Those sort of force feed air in at a certain frequency to give the car a lot of power. You can actually drop 0.3 of a second and quarter mile just by doing that. Stock on this car, and get some AM dry flow filters. If you want to do things on the cheap and sort of not too expensive and get some actual real tangible gains, that's some good ways to do it. And like I said, I'll get into some detail on that in some other videos. Also, if you want to have the car corner a little bit better, especially on sort of initial corner entry, I would recommend some sway bars. Okay, I've talked a lot. I got a ton of videos coming because there's just so much detail that I can cover in this car. Hope you enjoy the channel. Hope you enjoy the videos, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.